Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. Chet Nichols is an American singer, songwriter, composer, producer, multi-instrumentalist, and recording artist. He has toured extensively across the U.S. and has lived in many cities over the span of his career. Chet first came to my attention with his 1972 album, Time Loop. With over 2,500 songs and compositions to his credit, along with the production of 50 original music albums in a wide variety of genres, just being the tip of the iceberg. Chet has also had a successful career in film, behind the scenes, and in front of the camera. Commercial film production, including special effects and animation design, and has worked as creative director and executive producer. He has garnered many awards over the years and was inducted into the Kansas City Music Hall of Fame in 2008. Mr. Nichols has written 2 novels as well, and he's still recording, releasing material, and playing live to this date. Time permitting, we'll try to cover as much of my guest's history as we can. Well, hello, Chet.
How are you, Greg? It's a delight to be here.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time and for being here today.
You know,
Wow,
your efforts are really like folklore because you're gathering history.
right.
And my sister is a curator at the
Oh, okay.
Cornell Art Museum, and she always talks about collecting and saving information about artists because where does it go?
Right,
You
right.
know?
Well, I think that is part of it, the motivation. Of course, the music, that I just enjoy from, the time periods that I talked to people that were, it was their heyday. But yeah, a lot of that. In fact, my brother and he brought up a few years ago, he said, why don't we document, just like elderly people, you know, get a good camera, and charge them a small fee and then, do like a bio of their lives. And then they'll have it on tape or, a file, and they can share it with their children, and pass it down, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I guess that kind of rubbed off on me a little bit too. But, I just enjoy my music, aficionado, maven, I love music. So, uh, it's been a no-brainer for me. But yeah, I like that in history, I love history. So I think it just kind of all comes together, in this. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I
Um,
appreciate it. And by the way, it's the Kansas Music Hall of Fame,
uh-huh.
not the Kansas City Music Hall
Oh,
of Fame.
okay. Okay. All right. The Kansas Music Hall of Fame. Got it. Okay. All righty. That is a
I made
difference.
that mistake once too, so I was corrected immediately.
That is a different city. Okay. All right. Well, let's go back to the beginning.
Okay,
Talk about where you were born.
okay. Well, I was born in Evanston, Illinois. My father was a opera singer and a photographer. But as a young man, when he first got married, he was worked in public service in Evanston, Illinois, and he was the first dog warden of Evanston. He loved animals, and he was the first
All right.
dog warden. So they had him being an opera singer. They also had all kinds of funny, community pieces in the local magazines where he's like singing, right? Singing looks like he's singing, and then he's got like 3 dogs next to him, and their heads are all back howling. So there was a sense of humor that runs and sarcasm that runs through the family. And he and my mom met in the church choir
Okay.
at St. Mary's Church in Evanston, Illinois. And he kind of his business changed, and he started singing at weddings. He was also a photographer. So when he went from being a dog warden, he went to being a patrolman, and he was the very first motorcycle policeman in Evanston. He was chasing a speeder one day, dropped the bike, broke both legs. My mom said, "Look, you're gonna find another job because you got 4 little kids. I can't have you coming home in a wheelchair." So he had a love for photography. We had photo lab in the basement, and he would go off and shoot pictures at weddings, and he would sing at the weddings. And then he sang at a very high society. I'm not going to say who it was because it's a big name at his wedding. And he went to the guy and said, "Well, hey, can I take pictures?" And he looked and said, "Chet." His name was Chet too. He says, "Chet, I've got like 200 photographers. These guys are pros. Just sing. That's all I want." He said, "Well, if can I take some?" He said, "I like you. You're a good guy. Go ahead and that's fine." So he sang at the wedding. It was a huge event, huge society event in Chicago. And then the next week he came over and went to visit him to pick up his check. And he also gave him an envelope filled with photos. And, this guy owned the Chicago Tribune. He looked at the pictures and said, these are the fabulous. He says, "Would you like to come and work for me as a photographer?" And he said, "Sure." So he jumped, he was still doing the singing, he was still doing opera stuff, but then he jumped into working as a photographer and eventually was the star photojournalist in the photography segment for the Chicago Tribune, which was a big deal because they were a national newspaper.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
sort of,
Good that your dad didn't take no for an answer and went ahead and took pictures anyway.
yeah, well, that
Yeah.
was sort of been my credo. The word no is
Right.
not allowed.
Right. Right.
Because
You
if you
know?
say no,
Uh-huh.
the universe is going, "Oh, he just said no, so he doesn't want it. That's fine. I'm not going to help him."
Right. Right.
You go like,
I
"Why
don't.
didn't that happen?" That's because you
Right.
said no, and the universe said, "Well, let's go back to what are you going to have for lunch?" So
Right. 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 Well, do you early on, do you remember hearing music in the household?
the house was filled with music. Um, Mom was a singer, dad was a singer. Dad was involved in the Polish opera group. My uncle Pietro ran the Italian opera group. My aunt Elaine was the one who first introduced me to piano. She was the most magnificent and coolest piano player I've ever heard. She could sit down and play anything. So there was always singing, there was always music in the house. Then, unfortunately, my father passed away when I was 6. And I was going to a Catholic school, and the nun who ran the music department had us in like a little choral group, as an event during class, and my voice just like streaked through the crowd, and she said, "Well, you're going to go up front because you can carry a tune and you've got a loud voice." And then she introduced me to cello and the piano. And I had already played around with the piano. I was interested in the cello because she said you have to play 2 instruments.
Mhm.
So she taught me how to play cello. And I really was a prodigy on it. I mean, I kind of mastered it in a year. And I was very, very good on the piano. And she started me in competitions as like a 9-year-old. So at 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, I was playing all these competitions and on cello and on piano. So that was sort of this circuit that she was in within the Chicago Archdiocese area. So, and then on top of that, I sang. So when I went to high school, I wanted to go to New Trier High School, which was a great performing arts school, and I bought my first guitar when I went to visit my uncle down in San Diego, and he took me down to Tijuana. Okay. And I'm like 13 years old, and he takes me down to Tijuana with my 2 other cousins. And we go down into a Mexican bar, and it's Tijuana, I'm going like, we're walking by these bars, and there's all this really weird music and loud drums, and we're peeking, and he's going like, "Over here, kid, keep your head, keep your head."
Yeah, turn
So
over
we
here.
went to this bazaar, and my older brother especially was playing, had a little duet with a friend of his, where my older brother played guitar and banjo, and his buddy played guitar. And I was really interested in the guitar, so I went in and I went to the bazaar while my uncle was walking around buying stuff. perfume and stuff that for Aunt B. And I looked at a guitar and I said, "Hey, can I play that?" And this guy looked at me and says, "You know, what do you want? Come on, what do you want? And I was like, "Well, let me play this guitar." So I knew E-A-B-7. That was it, E-A-B-7. So I played this and I played this and I played this and I stood there and played those three chords over and over and again. Finally, the guy goes, "What are you doing here? Like, you want to buy the guitar or what? You're driving me crazy. You don't really know how to play the guitar." And I said, "Well, how much you want for it?" And he said, $35. Now, back in 1962, or yeah, 1962, that was a lot of money. And so I said, "I don't have that much." He says, they took the guitar back and put it up over here. So then, Uncle Jack said, "Hey, so what are you doing?" I said, "There's a guitar over there. I really wanted to buy it." He said, what does he want?" He said, $35. He said, "Forget it." He says, "How much you got in your pocket?" And I said, "Well, I got probably $20, but I've got, he says, what denominations you got?" And I said, "Well, I have five, a $5 bill, five ones and a 10. He says, "Tell him you got $8 and some change. And just tell him, here's what I'll give you for the guitar." So I went over there and I said, "Can I play that again?" He goes, "Oh yeah, okay." And EAB7, the EAB7's driving him crazy. And finally he says, takes it, puts it away. He says, "You want to play this guitar?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "You have any money?" I said, "Well, yeah, I do." He said, "How much you got?" I said, $8.36. He goes, "Oh, go away. Get it. Just, So Uncle Jack came back over, was buying all this stuff, and he was talking to this guy. And the guy said, he said, "Well, why don't you help him buy the guitar?" And he goes, "No, I'm all out. I bought all this other stuff." So he said, "How much you got?" He said, $8.36. He went, "Ah, ay caramba." And he looked at this little kid, says something to him in Spanish, and he says, "Hold on." He sends him off to the boss, probably his wife,
Yeah.
and says, "Hey, there's this guitar. This kid will give us $8.36. He came back and begrudgingly, he says, "Okay, give me the money and get out of here because I don't want to see you anymore." So I got this guitar and I get into the car. We're going over to the US, over to San Diego. EAB7, EAB7. Even my Uncle Jack was saying, "Is that all you know?" So, so first thing I did was I went and bought a chord book
Okay. Okay.
and started playing chords.
Uh,
And then I wrote my first song when I was 12. And it was about a lonely rich boy. It was a doo-wop song. Doo-doo-doo. Yeah, it was just one of those doo-wop kind of things. It's funny too. I still have the recording.
you do.
I
Oh,
do.
okay.
I'm like like a real collector. So I
Uh-huh.
have all these acetates of all of these recordings I've done. And back then, tape machines were not really what we were using. They would go directly to acetate. So when I
Acetate.
would go into the studios, and I have all those ancient acetates.
Uh,
So I started doing that. And then I wanted to, I had like four songs I had written, and I needed a job because, dad was gone and mom was trying to raise four kids. So I was cutting grass, I was shoveling snow. And I got a job in this ice cream parlor working as a busboy. So I went to the owner, and a Sunday morning or Sunday afternoons, I'd say, "You need to get somebody to come in here and play some music here." And he says, "Well, who do you know?" I said, "I'll do it." He says, "What?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Do you know how to play?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, bring your guitar next week and play me a couple songs. We'll see." So I sat there and went, "God, I got to write a song. I got to write a song that will just make sure I get booked on this." So I wrote this song called "I'm the Ice Cream Man." Okay,
all right. Yeah.
which is on my website,
Uh-huh.
and wrote a couple of different versions. So I played one song, and the guy went, "Okay." I said, "Well, I got one other one. It's about ice cream." And he goes, "Okay." So I played that song, and he started smiling. He says, "Okay, you can play to the crowd, but then you got to go back to busting tables." I was like, "Fine." It was great, and he paid me like $5, right, to perform live. So I went from there, and they started playing at this little ice cream shop, and the people would come in because they'd say, "Where's that kid with the guitar? He's really good." And then as I went to high school, I started a band. I bought a Silvertone amp and a Silvertone guitar from my cousin for $75. And I started a band called The Chosen Few.
Right. Yeah.
Now, every town and every city in the United States of America had a band called The Chosen Few. So
And in the UK.
we were
Yeah.
the Chicago
Uh,
Chosen Few,
uh-huh.
and I was writing really good um, uh, original songs. So half our songs were covers, half our songs were my originals, and we would do battles of the bands, and we would play my originals, and we never lost the battles of the bands. So, and when we would play these venues, these clubs, people wanted to hear my songs. And if you listen to uh, the Ice Cream Man Review, which is one of my albums that's on my site, the Ice Cream Man Review, all those old songs are on there. Now, they're not the original versions because I had a friend of mine who came down with ALS, and he'd been suffering with something for a while. And this was, I don't know, I'd say 10 years ago, maybe more. And he came and said, "Hey, I got ALS," and he's like, "Well, you'll be okay. It's a slow thing." Well, it was vicious and it was fast, and he was deteriorating really quickly. And I went to him, and he was like, my best buddy, and I said, "What can I do for you?" He says, "I want to hear your old songs again." And I was like, "What old songs?" He says, "The old songs, the Ice Cream Man, You Made Me Cry, Summer Love." Well, he knew all the songs. So I found a tape that had some of the old songs on it, and I remembered some of the other ones, and I sent the tape to Stephen Barncard, who was my producer on three of my albums, and I had him cedarize it and then send me the tracks back, and then I redid them as a gift to my friend Lee Keating. And the last time I saw him, I created art. I recorded all these songs. I mastered them. I mixed them. I played all the instruments, sang all the parts. And the last time I saw him, I walked over and I gave him a CD. And he really was incapacitated, but they were surprised that he reached up and grabbed it and just held it to his heart. And that was the last time I saw him.
You could tell how much it meant to him.
So anyway,
We'll talk about real quick before moving
I
on
was
about
going to time loop, going to the time loop thing. Want to do that?
okay, yeah. Before that, some of your influences. I know there's
Oh,
a
okay.
bunch of them, and
Oh,
yeah, and
well, I grew up in Chicago. I mean, Jerry Lee Lewis. I love Jerry Lee Lewis. We had tons of music in the house. I mean, there was Hayden, of course, who developed the orchestras.
yeah,
Or Haydn. I'm sorry, Haydn, not Hayden. So there are a lot of classical music, but the rock, was like the Beach Boys, the rock bands from the U.S., the rock bands from Britain, and a lot of blues. I mean, I love Jimmy Reed. I loved B.B. King, Muddy Waters, the live Newport. I wore out three of those albums just playing them over. I got my mojo working, and it just ain't working on you. And so I have a lot of blues influences, a lot of rock stuff, because that's what when I had my band, that's what we were playing, and people wanted to hear those types of songs. And then when the band broke up because the couple of guys graduated, another guy had to go into the armed services, I graduated, went off to college, I started writing. I had an acoustic guitar that I bought that I still have. It's this Gibson over here. Still have that.
Okay.
Same one. It was custom made Gibson, made in Kalamazoo.
Does your acoustic snore quite a bit? While it's
It
sleeping?
does, but I have a CPAP on it.
Okay.
So
There we go.
here we go.
Okay, that's
Man
always
dies on in an interview, chokes on laughter. I love that.
yeah.
Uh,
The headline. The headline. Okay.
anyways, so I started writing these sort of outside loner psychedelic folk songs because I was still writing rock songs, but I was also really doing a lot of experimentation, and I was doing a lot of tunings because I was classically trained in cello, piano. I'd already been playing around with the guitars, the normal standard tuning, and I was intrigued with all these tunings. So people like Joni Mitchell, um, uh, Gordon Lightfoot, Ian and Sylvia, uh, Chad Mitchell Trio,
Mm,
Simon and Garfunkel. Yeah, I mean, the whole array. Tim Buckley was a big influence.
yeah.
Uh, Tim Harden, a lot of the folky guys and the gals, right? So a friend of mine, my bass player, came back from college in summer, and he said, "Well, here I got this album you got to listen to," and it was uh, Joni Mitchell's first album, "Song of the
Mm,
Seagull," I think is the name of it. And I put it on there, and I was listening to it, and after I played the album, I sat down and wrote this song, "Time for Leaving," which is I just sat there and wrote this song. Da, 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 da. The lyrics just came out. I had a little chord progression. It's a beautiful song. Um, the opening line is, "The first time I heard you, first time I heard you sing, we were alone. I was laying on my bed and you were on the headphones." Bingo, bullseye, right?
yeah.
So, and it's this whole song about leaving, being left, and that was sort of her moniker at the time. So, those types of artists really influenced me. Roger McGuinn, I met him when I opened for the Chad Mitchell Trio when I was in high school. And he pulled me aside afterwards and said, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it because you're gonna make it. And to this day, Roger and I are friends. We don't see each other as, we haven't seen each other in a while, but we still, communicate. So I got influenced to all of those artists. And then when I went to college, I didn't have a band, and I was, again, I was putting myself through college. I was working at the student union. I was playing little coffee houses where we'd pass the hat. And I made the jump to go play this coffee house in Kansas City called the Vanguard. And we drove through this blizzard to get to the open mic at the Vanguard in Kansas City. And we walk in there, and I had three lady friends who were with me. Wanted to make sure I didn't get lost. And so I walked in the door, and it was a snowy night. The place was about half full. And the guy looked at me and says, "So what can I do for you?" "Well, I'm here for the open mic." And he kind of looked at me up and down and said, "Open mic is over now. So, thanks for coming in." And I said, "Hey, wait a minute. We drove in from Lawrence to this blizzard so I could play some songs." And he was like, "No, no." He's just, "No, we're done." And the girls like leaned on him and said, "Mister, you got to listen to this guy." I said, "Look here, I'll do you." Because I was, like I had this romantic vision of getting on the National Coffee House tour. Because it was like every cool singer songwriter was on that tour.
Whoops. Yeah.
So I went into it and I looked at this guy. I said, "Look, I'll play one song." And I played this song, Electra. I'll play one song. And if you don't like it, just give me all right. And if you do like it, give me this. So the place went quiet when I was playing Electra. They're like, "Who is this guy?" And even the sound man was like, he was like, his jaw dropped. And so I looked at it, I said, "Well, thanks for having me." And the guy goes, "No, no, 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 keep playing." So I played, and I played, I was about to end, and he would say, "Keep playing." So I played about 6 songs.
Mm.
And I packed up my guitar. We left. We were out in the snow. I was getting in the car, and the guy comes running out and saying, "Hey, hey, hey, where are you going?" "I'm going back to school. Thanks for letting me play." He said, "No, you got to come back in here. I want to book you." So he started booking me, and I was opening for Chuck and Joey Mitchell, um, Danny Cox, Brewer and Shipley, all kinds of, really good solo artists. Taj Mahal, they had all kinds of really great artists in there. Kenny Rogers. So I had the opportunity to be sort of this professional opening act, which I enjoyed. I mean, I didn't need to be a headliner. I just wanted to get up there and play my stuff. And I was getting paid. Wasn't a whole lot of money, but I still have the original contract too.
Do
Being
you?
the collected I have of getting like $200 for the week, to play at this coffee house. So that's what sort of precipitated my career as a soloist. And in the meantime, this DJ named Stephen Barncard, who was
Mhm.
on the radio station, he had a night show, and he was like, "Hi, it's Stephen Barncard, and it's the Night Freak," and he
Yeah,
would play all these
that DJ voice. Yeah.
obscure stuff.
Uh-huh.
And then he saw me play once at UMKC, and he saw me at the Vanguard, and he got a hold of me. He says, "Hey, would you like to come on? I'd like to interview you, just like this,
Uh-huh.
and bring your guitar. Well, you can play live to the audience." And I was like, "How many people? What's the audience?" He goes, "I don't know, 10 or 15 people." He was laughing, of course. There were more than that.
Yeah.
So I started playing, and the phones lit up, you know, and people wanted to talk to me, and they were talking about the music, and it just sort of helped my career. Then I kept playing and going to school. Steven left Kansas City, went out to work to build some studios in San Francisco or in LA. Then I always had these mysterious, mystical experiences where I'd run into him in the middle of nowhere, right?
Uh-huh.
And he eventually we ran into each other on the Sunset Strip in LA. In fact, I was at the Hollywood Center Hotel, which is where they shot LA Confidential. I'm in bed. My car's parked in the lot. This voice wakes me up. Get up and go to the car. Get up and go to the car. Get up and go to the car. And I was like, okay, okay. So I went out to the car, and there was a note in the windshield. And it was from Stephen Barncard. He said, "I was just wandering around Hollywood. I saw your van," because he knew my car. "And what are you doing here?" So I contacted him. We got together. We talked about this. He said, "I'm going to move up to San Francisco and work at this place called Wally Heider's. Let's stay in touch."
Mm.
So we stayed in touch. And then I had signed a record contract with Buddha Kama Sutra. And they wanted to do this album. And I said, "Well, okay. Uh, how do you want to do this?" So they said, "Hook me up with Nick Gravenitis." You know who Nick Gravenitis is, right? And Nick was up in San Francisco. There you go, baby. There you go.
I
Right
had
there.
that ready. Blast
There
from
you
your
go.
past. There
There
we
you go.
go.
Oh my
I
God,
got.
unbelievable. I'm expecting him to come through the door next. So uh, I I was on tour, and I blocked out this 2-week period, and I drove from Kansas to San Francisco, and I called him up and said, "Hey Nick, I'm here ready to record. Let's do some stuff." He says, "Ah man, I'm backed up, big brother. I'm having problems with Janice. Big brother, I'm having problems with the Doors. I'm having, there's all kinds of stuff. Why don't you just get in your car and like drive up the coast and camp for a couple of weeks and then come back?" And I'm going like, "Camp? Did you say camp? I didn't come here to camp, man. I've got a schedule, a tour schedule, and I have to, stay to the schedule." So he said, "Well, let me see if I can sort this out." So the only other person I knew in San Francisco was Stephen Barncard. And I called him up and I said, "Hey, Stephen, is this your Night Freak?" He says, "Oh, it's Baron von Brost." And I said, "Yes." So he said, "Well, what's going on?" I told him what was going on. He said, "Well, man, you need to come to the studio." I said, "Well, where is it?" So he told me. He said, "Well, when can you come in?" I said, "I don't know. When's good for you?" He says, "Well, why don't you come in tonight?"
Mhm.
So I went into the studio. It was just he and I, and he set up some microphones, and I started playing. And it was friggin' magic that was coming out of the guitar. And this I was ready to record. I mean, these songs were ready to go. So we sat down and we cranked out, I think, in that 2 week period, like 14 songs. You know, I played all the instruments. It's a very minimalistic album where there's just a lot of me and the guitar. Uh, if you try to throw a band in the stuff like Lonely Woman and Tell Me What the Count Is and some of these and the Beatles are coming, it just wouldn't work.
Right.
They're too intricate in the guitar work. They're too you would just wash out the tonality that's in the guitar. So we took it back to Kansas City, played it for them, and they all went, "This is magnificent." So they sent it off to Kama Sutra, and Kama Sutra said, "Well, we really like this, but there's no single on here." And I said, "Well, yeah, there is. It's Electra." And they said, "Nah, we're not hearing it. You need a single." And I was like, "No, there's Electra's the single. I'm telling you right now, this is what the audience is telling me." So they went, "Nah, we're not going to really do a deal unless there's a single on there." So I sat down, and Jerry Lee Lewis, of course, was my, sort of inspiration on piano. And so I sat down and wrote this song, Spinning on the Time Loop, which has got this kind of Jerry Lee Lewis kind of thing
Yeah.
vibe on it.
Yeah.
And I recorded it in my studio in my farm, just a little 2-track. And they said, "That's great. We're going to go in the studio. We'll get that done." We called up Nick Gravenitis because they didn't want Stephen Barncart producing it. So we called up Nick. Nick said, "Okay, I got some time." He brought in Nicky Hopkins to play piano.
Oh, I love his
He
piano work.
brought in Dave Garibaldi from Tower of Power to play the drums, and Pete Sears to play bass. You know, he played
Yeah.
on the
Jefferson
Airplane
Starship.
and
Jefferson.
the
Yeah.
whole thing. I mean, he's been with everybody.
Yeah.
And we had some other street musician who was just he was lost with the song. So I played the guitar. And in fact, when I sat down with Nicky and was showing him the song, he looked at me. He gave me this funny look, and I said, "Is everything okay? Can you play this?" He says, "Mate, why do they have me here?" And I said, "Well, you're Nicky Hopkins." He says, "You could play this better than I can. I'm telling you." I said, "They don't want me playing the piano. So I'd love to play the piano. I still think it's one of Nicky's greatest solos at the end of
Yeah.
that album. That whole thing
Yes.
that he does. It's just, and I'm in touch with Nick. I was in touch with him before he passed away, but with his people, and they just love that song. Anyway,
I wanted to interject real quick. He did a great solo instrumental with Quicksilver
yes,
called Spindrifter.
yes.
If you have or haven't heard that, it's a
I was a
great.
big fan of Quicksilver. I
Yeah.
was really involved with the whole San Francisco music scene, as well as being involved with the Laurel Canyon music
Yes.
scene that was going on there. So I was kind of going bumping between LA and then Kansas, LA, San Francisco, Kansas, LA, San Francisco. So anyway, we record this song. We send it to Stephen was the engineer on it, so at least they respected him that much. But he was a little pissed off about it. It's okay. We've gotten over it. So we sent that song to them. They said, "Okay, we're going to produce this," and they put the album out. So that's how Time Loop got made.
Yeah.
And I had a 5 album deal with them. And Stephen and I went to work right away on the follow-up album, which is called Waving Fairy.
Yeah. Before you move on, I wanted to. Well, what I'd normally like to do is like mention some of my favorites and then get your either the backstory or your
Oh, okay.
inspiration
Yep,
behind the songs, if you would.
no problem.
Of course, Electra.
Mhm.
You know, what's the inspiration behind that track?
Um, I was when I was at University of Kansas, I was studying theater arts, various sciences, history, creative writing, and I was really into the creative writing courses. And this one teacher that I had a class on the British Romantic poets. So I started reading all these, Keats and Shelley and Wordsworth and Coleridge. And so there's all this symbolic kind of almost Greek muse kind of themes that are going through a lot of their stuff. And also I was just, I'm totally enamored with the oceans and
Yes.
stars. So there's a lot of ocean kind of stuff that's on Time Loop. But the inspiration for that was this sort of, it was this ethereal sort of spiritual love, electric come down from above, come from the shrouding skies, and it's just the whole thing of this sort of ethereal love coming down and blending with you. So, which is still something I do right now. I've been a serious meditator for about 50 years, and I can do all kinds of stuff with meditation. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but that was the inspiration. And then there's, water sandcastles, and you've got all these. You go ahead and give me your list there.
Okay. The other one that we talked about, you mentioned earlier, spinning on the time loop.
Mhm.
That reminds me of the band.
Yeah, I'm a big band fan. I mean, I was always a big band fan. And I'd always, I'd meet these guys and I'd say, "Hey, you got room for me in a band?" And they'd go, "No." I said, "Why don't, why don't you let me be in the band?" And they're like, "No, no." And I didn't really understand what was going on with bands I mean, I understood to a certain degree,
Uh-huh.
but there's so much politics when you really study the history of the bands, the stuff that's going on, and then you start injecting a new person into it. And one guy said, "Well, we might do it. You can work for the band. We'll pay you like a monthly salary." And I'm going like, "Huh? You mean I'm not like part of the band and get percentages and stuff like that?" No, no, that's not the way it works. And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'll just keep doing solo stuff." But so I mean, that's Electra was that type of tune, and it was just sort of this poetic song, and I still like that. I still like to write those kinds of songs. I
Yeah.
mean, I like to write country, I like to write blues, I like to write blues, rock. I'm very much into instrumental music right now, where I'm creating atmospheric kinds of things using certain tones and tonalities that are comforting and meditative and health driven. But I'll do some of those, but then I go back and working on something else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's sort of an outlet for me.
Well, let me tell you, my favorite track on the whole album is "Who Stole the Ivy."
Great song. Great song.
Yes.
Very much I'll never forget. I was sitting there on a bench in Lawrence, Kansas, in the park, and I was just sitting there. The country was real. There's a lot of upheaval going on, and I was just by myself, and I was just sitting in this park that's sort of in the central part of Lawrence. And I always carry my writing books with me, so I always have a journal, writing journals. They're everywhere. In fact,
There it
over
is.
here I got a stack of about 6 or 7 of them, and they're all filled. But I've got boxes and boxes and boxes of writing journals with tons of unfinished songs. I go like, well, gee, I don't need to write anything because I've got years and years and years and years of songs that have just never been recorded or added music to them because they're just waiting to be done. But there's only so much time in the day to do it. Um, but Who Stole the Ivy was really sort of a contemplative, like, things about doubts in the world, doubts in people's hearts, doubts in people's mind, and how those can actually go in and kind of steal the ivy and steal the fruit from your life. And because we're meant to be fruitful. I mean, our creativity is there to make us blossom and bloom. And so
Right.
this was this sort of ethereal internal discourse I was having with myself, going like, well, why is this and why is that? and that there's a lot of questions that are asked in Who Stole the Ivy. And there's a lot of people that wouldn't understand the song, but I have old friends that will call me up or out of the blue, and they'll say, I was just playing Who Stole the Ivy, and they said, I don't know how many people would really understand what's going on with this song, but it is just my favorite tune. So you're not alone. And I love that song. It really personifies a lot of what Time Loop is all about. And again, it's a poetic kind of song, very Wordsworth-like, because he was very much into nature. So there's a lot of those integral parts in there.
Very pretty melodic song too.
Yeah.
Joy. And then of course the Beatles are coming, which years later would be the remixed, remastered with some different tracks, the
Right.
title of that album. So
that's the reason we did that too is we had Time Loop, and then Stephen approached me in like 2014 and said, hey, how would you feel about us going in and remixing and remastering the original album and bringing it up to modern day sonic guidelines? And I said, yeah, I'm all for that. I said, at the same token, would you do me a favor? I know there's some tracks on Time Loop that are the wrong tracks. Somehow in the process when we were selecting and pulling the takes, certain tracks were not the ones that I wanted. The songs, they were the songs I wanted, but they weren't the cuts I wanted. So he said, okay, no problem. And sure enough, when he started going through here and gleaning through everything, he found different versions of Lonely Woman, different versions of Tell Me What the Count Is, and a couple of others. Also found Red Tide, which is a great song. I mean, Red Tide's a great song. And Water Sandcastles. Everyone loves Water Sandcastles. Every time I do an interview, they select that song, and it's sort of the intro. And today we're going to have Chet Nichols, and there's Water Sandcastles in the background. People seem to really like that tune.
Well, before we move on to the Waving Prairie, you toured to promote the album. Any shows that stand out in your mind?
Yeah, there's a lot of shows. Everyone's got some funny aspects to them. I don't know that I should talk about them on camera.
That's all right.
But
When I do these, when I edit these, they're in YouTube. There's a part that says, "Is this for children?" And I always say, "No."
Yes. Okay.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of really great shows that it was funny because when I opened for the Guess Who, and I did a tour with them in Oklahoma and a little bit in Texas. And after the first night, Burton Cummings comes into my dressing room and he says, "Hey, buddy." I said, "Yeah." He says, "It's no fair." I said, "Not fair what?" He says, "It's not fair that you're so good." I said, "Well, but you paid me to open up the audience and get them warmed up." He says, "Yeah, but you're just like too good, And I was like, well, I can't tone it down. I mean, and
Yeah.
so he said, "I'm just kidding you." He says, "Your stuff is magnificent." He says, "Reminds me of Gordon Lightfoot." Of course, those guys are from Canada, as is Joni Mitchell. So he said, "Reminds me of Joni Mitchell," as is the band, the guys in the band from Canada.
Yeah.
So I mean, I have a lot of shows, a lot of memories. The shows where I played with the Airplane were all very, very unique. I'll select one which is, I think, an okay one because it doesn't get too far out there. And so it's in Memorial Hall in Kansas City. And everybody had seats, okay? And I just did a show with them in Boulder, which is one I really can't talk about because it was pretty wild. So I go up and I'm playing in front of my hometown crowd, and I'm opening for the Airplane at that show. And everybody was having a great time. They were enjoying the music, but there was one lady down below who was a little bit um, she had engaged in some sort of a psychotropic uh, element that was flowing through her veins. So she kept getting up and wanting to talk to me while I'm performing. And I was just, I'd be nice and I'd say, hey, I'm on stage right now and there's all these people here. I could play this show. And then her girlfriends would come and get her and took her and sat her back down. So uh, she would, I'd start into another song and she'd pop up and she'd be waiting at the foot of the stage again. And she wanted to talk to me. And this chorus was, being uh, broadcast throughout the stadium there, or the hall. And it was some funny discourse. And I'm a funny guy and I'm very sarcastic, but I'm very kind to people. And I would just say, well, we can talk maybe about this later, but right now I've got to finish up this show. So at that point, I took my beloved guitar, that guitar over here, on the floor behind me, and I played this song called King Barlow, which was like a John Mayhall kind of Paul Butterfield harmonica song. And I played two harmonicas at the same time, the bass harmonica and a standard harmonica. They're Marine bands. And I would start it off, there was like a bass harmonica, so I set it off with this real deep bluesy thing. And then when I'd start playing the riffs, I'd jump up to the regular one. So everybody starts clapping. I says, hey, okay, you're obligatory, you got to clap along kind of thing. And they got into it and everybody was clapping. And I'm closing my eyes and I'm getting into this groove, this Mayhall kind of Paul Butterfield thing. And the next thing I know is somebody has grabbed me near the belt line. Okay.
We got you.
And I open my eyes and there she is. And she says, like a few things that she liked to do. And I'm going, I said, we can't do that. She's like, she's really forcing me backwards. And I feel myself kicking my guitar and I'm going, she's going to knock me over. I'm going to fall on that guitar and I'll get pissed off because I love that guitar. And so I'm a big guy, so I'm like, one of those guys, star seeds. It's a big person. And I was just big and tall and athletic looking. So I just lifted her up off the ground. I said, you know something, you're not supposed to be here right now. I've got to finish my show. In the meantime, these guys are coming from the Presidiums, and I'm going, would you mind taking her, and getting her off stage? So I took her off stage. And during this whole thing, the crowd just never missed a beat. They were still doing this. And I'm going like, okay, this is very Greco-Roman. And so I finished the song and uh, finished the song. And I went backstage and she was in the ground and the police were pinning her down and she was screaming. And I walked over and said, hey, guys, I know you're on the job, okay? But he says, what do you know about the job? And I said, well, my dad was a policeman, so I know it's a job. I said, look, I'm not going to press any charges. Just let her up and let me talk to her. And they're going, no, we're going to arrest her. I said, no, I'm not pressing any charges. So they let her go. I kind of put my arm around her. I said, here, let's just take a walk. I walked her outside. I looked at one of my roadies. I said, would you go find her friends? So they brought her in. She obviously had ingested something. And I said, hey, just get her home and make sure she's taken care of. So fade to black, I play at the University of Missouri in Columbia. And I'm standing and backstage, suddenly this woman appears. And I'm kind of going, I know her. And she sheepishly comes over to me. She says, uh, I am, I was the girl that jumped you on stage in Kansas City. And I was like, oh, I said, how are you? Everything okay? She says, yes. She said, I have to apologize. She said, but you were so nice. you're so nice that my boyfriend and I would like you to come and spend the night at our house and make you dinner and make you breakfast. And it's just as a thanks for being so nice. And I was like, well, cool, sure, why not? And so I went to their house. They made me dinner. They made me breakfast in the morning, and then I was off to St. Louis.
That's a
Uh,
that's a good story. That's a good
yeah,
story. Yeah, and that she had the wherewithal to come and apologize like that too.
she was really cool. I mean, and the thing is, I met a lot of really good people on tour. John McEwen from Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. I did a fair amount of performing with them, and we did several shows where I opened the show, and then Steve Martin came out and did
Ah,
his arrow through the head routine,
right.
and then the
I saw
Dirt
that
Band.
tour. I saw that tour. Yes, I did. Went to see him.
So I might have been, I may or may not, depending on what part of the country we're in.
Well,
But
well, well,
go
I
ahead.
was going to say, talk about that because there's another one I want to hear about too. George Carlin, one of my favorites.
Oh, okay.
How did those tours come together? So it was like a music and comedy combined. It was how did
Yeah,
that
well,
help?
the thing was is that John McEwen and Steve Martin are old buddies. I think they worked together when they were like serfs at the little worker bees at Walt Disney, and they sort of knew each other from there. And then John, of course, is a magnificent multi-instrumentalist and singer and writer and producer and everything. I keep going like, well, why can't I be in your band, John? I'm still alive. There are not too many guys left. Why not? I don't know. Band's not working this week, so it's good, whatever. But he was always very nice. Great to tour with him. There were a lot of guys that I toured with Brewer and Shipley. They were funny. I'm known for inspiring the song "One Toke Over the Line."
Oh, is that
That's a
right?
whole nother story.
Okay.
At the same token, working with Linda Ronstadt was great. John Denver was great. I mean, I really loved working with him. We did the first uh, show together at the Quiet Night in Chicago, and he just said, "God, I just love your music," and I did other shows with him after that, and he just thought it was a great mix because he has those kind of folky things, and I had these sort of outside loner folk acid weird. How'd you come up with that?
Uh,
Kind of songs, and even Neil Bogart, who ran Buddha Kama Sutra, when I first met him, he says, "Well, I have one question for you, Chet." And he said, "What's that?" He says, "How'd you come up with these songs? How do you get these ideas? Like where are they coming from?" I said, "Are you a stoner or something?" I'm like, "No, not really. I don't, I know all about it, but it's not something I'm engrossed with because it interferes with writing and performing." And when you're at least for me, everything was so intricate on the guitar, and then integrating that with the voice. If you walk up there and you're ripped, it's going to show. Audiences can pick up on authenticity like that. And I wanted my shows to always be authentic and real, and I always wanted to go out there and put out my best performance. And I think that goes back to my music teacher that taught me how to play all these instruments in grade school, because she would always stress that classical musicians are always reaching out to be better and better and better and better and better. So I felt like I owed it to the audience to always try to go out there and do my best shows. So
yeah, be true to yourself. Yeah. Uh, Over the years, has the playing live, is there less of a nervous factor before you go on, or
I'm
are the
always I'm
nerves
always nervous. Yeah,
a
yeah.
little bit there? Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's the reason is that because and I'll get kind of spiritual a little bit on this, is that there's always you're dealing with creating music, which is sound and frequency, and you're preparing to do that. And we human beings are these little crystalline little, cell, everything in our body is like silica crystals, and we vibrate at certain levels. And as you build up anticipation with adrenaline kicking in, your thought processes, there's always there's a build up to it. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I would just get really, jazzed up before I go out there because I just wanted to always do a great job.
Right.
I owed it to the audience. I just wanted the audience to have a really good experience, because a lot of times I'd walk out there and it was always fun when I'd like open for the airplane, because there'd be 6,000 people. They already had their Mr. Natural cocktail, and the announcer would say, "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have the Jefferson airplane," and everybody go, "Ah!" But first, we have a fine singer-songwriter from Kansas. Welcome, Chet Nichols. And I would walk this skinny, long-haired, tall guy with the guitar, and they're going like, "Oh my God, they found a hitchhiker with a guitar, and he's going to go out there and open up the show," right? I go, "Well, yeah, I am a professional hitchhiker. I know all about it because I wrote a book about it." But it was always fun because I'd go out there and I could just see people look at me like, "Oh God, I'm having a bad trip right now." 16 bars, 16 bars into Electra, right, which was one of my opening songs. I had them. They were mine. I just took them on a trip that they never thought that they would go on. So the biggest issue is that I had this record deal, and then suddenly, the oil embargo hit. My management company was disintegrating. All this infighting was causing a disintegration. The record company itself was disintegrating, and they closed down. And I went from, having this, dream career, which is something I'd always dreamed about, to it all kind of going poof, right? So in the meantime, Stephen and I were still getting together. We did Waving Prairie as part of that Buddha Kama Sutra deal. And then I also did the Taxi to Tonganoxie album, which was me. I figured no one wants me to play in their band, so I'm just going to start a friggin' band. Went to Stephen and I said, "Hey, look, I've got all of these really cool, like rock, blues, country kind of songs that are going to be more in tune with having a band." And he said, "Well, I'll get some guys together." So he was living up in Beverly Glen. He had a studio in his house that was sort of in this tiered hill, and we brought in Fuzzy John Oxendine to play drums, um, Sons of Champlain, Billy Barasini, who played with Jackson Brown, Brewer and Shipley, played bass, Laura Allen. Oh my God. Unbelievable. She was the next step up from Joni Mitchell. Unfortunately, she came down with cancer and she passed away. She would do background vocals for me. We would do duets together. And then I had the incomparable, here I am the multi-instrumentalist as well, doing the singing and playing and the rest of it. But then we had Wayne Goodwin, who appeared, in this, and he just filled in everything, with his fiddle playing, his acoustic guitar work, his electric guitar work, and his lap steel is just like to die for. So that whole album, Taxi to Tonganoxie, is just a fun record.
I love the lap steel. I like when it's done right. Let's go back to the Waving Prairie. I want to mention
Okay.
track there. It's
Well,
to get your 2 cents.
Well, Waving Prairie, it started. Well, go ahead.
Go. Were you going to get the background? Go ahead.
So Waving Prairie was the extension of Time Loop. When we sat down, we had, I think there were probably 16 songs, and we had to cull it down to, I think, 10 or so. And then we threw in the little, I always like to throw a little gag thing in there. And so I did this one thing, Quasar Sleeper, which is this instrumental. And it's just sort of like a little lullaby after this intense album with all this imagery and the rest of it. It was like, okay, now we're going to go to bed. We're going to go to the stars. and here's your Quasar sleeper, and here's your ticket. Get on board.
Yeah, your ticket.
So I was a lot of those songs on Time Loop had already been written. So in the meantime, I was working on a lot of other songs. And Waving Prairie, I had an idea of what I wanted to do with it. And the song Waving Prairie, I think is just a magnificent piece.
Yeah.
And again, the influences of you know, the singer-songwriters of the day. I don't know where I would fall into, because some guys were more like, Jackson Brown was part of sort of the Eagles group, and then you had J.D. Souther and Don Henley and Glenn Fry, and you had those guys all kind of doing that kind of stuff. So Waving Prairie was sort of more on the loner, like the Joni Mitchell type uh, edge, that sort of wing on the singer-songwriters.
Let me tell you on that, on the Waving Prairie, the title track, what I hear on that is some Eastern mysticism in the guitar chords.
Yes, definitely,
I hear
definitely.
that. Yeah.
Definitely. I was really extending the tunings. So I have a very extensive list of tunings that I use on my guitars, and which put a lot of pressure on my guitar, because I usually travel with one, and invariably I'd be in the middle of a song. And because of the tunings and detunings and untuned and the humidity in the events that I'd be playing at, sometimes I'd pop a string. So I got really good at like changing a string on the stage real fast while I would chat. But I didn't really talk very much. I would say, hey, there's this song, it's a Lady O Lady. It's a song about, it's sort of this romantic kind of spiritual transformational song about love, and this woman, a butterfly, wanting to trade places with a woman, and the woman wanting to become a butterfly. So they immediately, when they met, they were like,
Yeah.
well, that's kind of a weird idea, man. I said, yeah, but it's one of those sort of ethereal kind of, again, romantic poetry type things.
Well, you just
But
hit on it. You just hit on it. Lady O Lady, that's my favorite on the album.
it is a great song.
Yeah.
And so with Lady O Lady, again, we wanted to keep sort of the minimalistic, but we also wanted to bring in some other players. And the next album, which was, I already had the material ready for the following three after that, so I was still working on those. So we pulled out, we did Waving Prairie, we brought in Zakir Hussain, who is Ali Akbar Khan was Ravi Shankar's drummer, the
Right.
tabla player, and Zakir is his son.
Yeah.
So he came in and he played on Kites in the County
Guys
and
in
on Waving
yeah.
Prairie. And then
Right.
we had John Kahn, who was Jerry Garcia's writing partner, and they played together. He played bass on a couple of the songs, Snowline and and another song. Jack Shore, who was Van Morrison's horn player, did a lot of the horn parts that were in there. We still kept it minimalistic because the songs were very sophisticated, and I was very much into maintaining the atmosphere of the song, and building an atmosphere so that the backgrounds were not necessarily sounds, they were more like colors. Again, trying to dial in those frequencies of that. So, but with Kites in the County, this is a great story. Um, so we go in and we do Waving Prairie. Okay, so I had the basic track done to Waving Prairie, and I didn't know exactly how it was going to turn out. I had a master track done. We brought in Zakir to listen to it, and he sat down. And the way the Indian drummers play is they have like 12 different notes that are all different terms for different types of riffs or whatever that they would play. So he sat down and kind of ripped this song out. I mean, it was just like because you don't hear, too much about it until I do that one shift where I go from the finger picking to strumming with a pick. And at that point, the whole thing just goes and explodes. And this, just song lifts up at that point because it's like a tornado. Not in a bad way or heavy metal. It was just that there's a lot of lift to the song. So when we were done with that, we figured we had that track down, and then I said, "Hey, thanks for coming in." He goes, "It says, oh no, wait a minute, don't you have any more? I want to keep playing." And I was like, "Really?" He says, "Yeah. Do you have any more songs? Let's do another song." So I said, "Well, I have this song called Kites in the County," and I said, "It kind of goes like this," and I pulled the guitar out, and it starts off the harmonics, a little harmonic piece, and then I says, "Does that sound like something you'd be interested in?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, well, we'll get the mic set up." And so we set the mics up, and Stephen did. And I said, "Okay, would you like to rehearse the song?" He goes, "No, no, 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 no. Just start playing. And I'll jump in." And I was like, "Okay, sounds good to me." So he's sitting there looking at me, I'm looking at him, and I start off with this song, and I'm singing it live while I'm playing the guitar and singing it live. And suddenly he gets him going, woo, 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 and the whole thing just like starts building, and it's got this sort of tiger in the jungle kind of a thing, very
Yeah.
spacey kind of a piece. And then once the song was kind of done, there was these dynamics that we put in here, and I kind of just looked at them like ready to fly. And so it was improv time because I figured we had what we needed. So I pulled the pick out and dropped, the finger picking thing, and just started playing, with this driving kind of beat, and playing all these riffs up here, and running up and down the neck. And he's in the background blah, 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 and doing all this stuff, and it's just going and going and going and going and building and building and building. And then finally, we're at the end where it's like da 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 da. We're going like where do we end this? And finally, I give him the head like this, and we go boom, and we end the song. So that song was never rehearsed. It was done one take,
Wow.
and what you hear is what we did, and that was that.
That was live. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I like the tablas. I really do. I wish they were used more, you know.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's a really nice sound.
I just
And
can't play guitar and tabla at the same time.
okay. Yeah. I can see that.
I use them on a lot of my instrumental stuff. I'll pull them in as detours that'll take you back onto whatever road I'm on.
Okay. Okay. Well, a close second, I said Lady O Lady was my favorite. Close second is Red Tide.
Red
Uh,
Tide this is a great story. There's a great story to this. I was doing my first tour, West Coast tour, to the clubs out there. And I started out in San Diego, which was really interesting because my uncle, that's where my acoustic guitar career started, was down in San Diego.
right.
And my uncle still lived there with my cousin Pat and Mike Broward, who is a fabulous singer-songwriter. Unfortunately, he just passed away a little while ago, but he was very much into the Jimmy Buffett kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he was just killer at it. My Aunt Bee, who is my dad's youngest sister, there were 13 kids in my dad's family. Grandma and grandpa were busy,
They
um,
were.
more ways than one or two or three. So I started and played that club, and I marched on up to some of the beach clubs, into LA, out to Pasadena, and then I was going up to Santa Cruz and up to San Francisco. And so I stopped and saw some friends of mine who were in San Luis Obispo.
Okay.
And they were friends of mine from high school, and they were swimmers. And they'd all gone to Yale, and this was summer break. And so they were working as lifeguards at the Carpinteria State Park Beach, which is the world's safest beach, right? And I pull up, and I knew that they were there because I was like an avid letter writer. You know, I was the guy who was always staying in touch with everybody. When somebody wanted to know, where's this guy? Where's that guy? To say, ask Chet, because he knows where everybody is.
Yeah.
And so I went and visited them.
Look, isn't it? Let me stop you real quick. Isn't it a shame that we've kind of lost that art, the letter writing? You know,
Absolutely.
with emails and
Or
all
even
that.
just the whole thing, you know, of reaching out and
Yeah,
staying in
yeah.
touch with people, you
Right,
know.
right. That was an
Kurt
art.
Vonnegut in Slaughterhouse-Five has
Yeah.
a great segment in there where he's talking about this book, and then he's going back to his life, back
Mhm.
into the book and back into his life. And then he says, he had this propensity, so it was like late at night, and he'd start drinking scotch. And the next thing you know, he's calling people up there on 3 time zones different, and they're asleep. And he goes, "Hey, Greg. Hey, Kurt, how are you, man? What's going on?" You're like in dreamland.
Uh-huh.
Kurt who? Kurt who? Kurt
Yeah,
Vonnegut. Of course, you have to take the call because it's Kurt Vonnegut, right?
yeah, yeah.
So anyway, back to Red Tide. So I stopped in, and uh, they are staying in this house right on it was the beach house, it was the lifeguard house. So they said, you can stay here if you want. I was like, okay, great. So we were just having fun. We're laying on the beach. We're just having fun. There were a lot of young gals running around. They were enamored with the lifeguards. I stayed out of it. It wasn't any of my business, but they were, you know, they all looked like Adonises, and I'm this tall, skinny guy with long hair, the hitchhiker guy.
Yeah.
So, and then they heard me play, and it was like, "Hey, what's your name again?" I'm going like, "Yeah, whatever." But Red Tide, we went out one night, and we had been drinking some beer, and I think I can say that. And
Yeah.
we'd been drinking some beer in the beach house, and they said, "Hey, let's go on outside." And we went outside. It was a beautiful, clear blue sky, or a dark sky, no moon. The stars were just sparkling like diamonds up in the sky. And in the meantime, I suddenly look at the water, and I see this as the waves were breaking, this whole fluorescent light like popped up, and then it would roll up on the shoreline, and I'd never seen it. It was a red tide.
Okay, right.
So the pressure of the waves breaking was the thing that there's some sort of chemical reaction that takes place. And so that the waves become like waves of light, that they're coming through, and they would hit the beach, and you could run along the beach and drag your feet. And as you drag your feet, the friction of your foot would actually leave like a flare in the sand. So we were having a lot of fun that night,
Yeah.
with the red tide. And so that was the thing that inspired that song. I went up after that. I went into my sleeping area and sat down and wrote that song. And over the next couple of days, I came up with the music to it. So, but I mean, I love that song. There's actually there's a version, and I'm thinking it's on the Waving Prairie, where it's Red Tide and Lady O
Yeah.
Lady
Yes. A
combined.
reprise. A
Yes,
reprise.
right.
Yeah.
And it's just
Yeah.
solo.
Yes. And I enjoyed that too as well. Yes. So I had a feeling that those were maybe a couple of your favorites too to do the
I
reprise.
love them all.
Yeah.
They're like my children. It's like the
There's
song that I wrote called, there's a song that I wrote called Backstage,
uh,
which is on the solo album that I released last summer
uh,
of Vintage a lot of vintage just solo tracks. And there's one song in there called Backstage, and it's about, you know, being a solo guy and just being on the road.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
Well,
there's aspects of that
well,
in those
well,
songs.
let me ask you about this. Where and when does the inspiration come to write the songs?
Um,
Just anytime?
you know, I learned a long time ago when via meditation, and it's always been sort of my mindset to just be aware and not to be in sort of a judgmental mindset. I would always, and so I'd write things down. That's why I have little pocket notebooks, and I have the regular ones I carry with me, because it's the old saying of, I write it down not to remember it now, so I remember it later.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of times I kick myself when I don't write things down. But my mind is just constantly open to any ideas. I'll be talking with somebody and they'll say something. I'll say, hold on a second, there's a song there. And I'll pull out my little writing notebook and I go, and I remember it. It could be a title. And I've got tons of this. I mean, I have books and books and books and books and books of this. There's so much, and you know, we're all on kind of an expiration date, you know, and
Yes.
you know, I'm going like I take care of myself because I want as much time as I can have so I can do the things that I would like to do. I'd like to produce. So that's where my mindset is. But the inspiration, it comes from, you know, of child being born or watching people like Walking in Circles. I don't know if you've listened to that album or that song. That was something. I was taking a friend of mine who had had a bad car accident, and he was going to see a psychologist because this accident changed his whole life, and he couldn't drive. So I would drive him to the doctor, and he had to go see this one psychologist in Chicago. And I said, well, I got him up to where he needed to go, and he could go into the building. And then I just sat in the car waiting to get the phone call that, hey, he's coming out. Or he would just come out and I would see him and I'd pull up and then I'd take him home. And while I'm sitting there, I'm just sitting watching the people, you know, and, you know, going, all I was doing is just recording the news, writing the news down. This is what's going on here. I'm seeing this, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing this. Um, uh, and then, you know, you take a song like The Needle in His Arm, which is a song that I've wanted to write for a long time because of all the people I've seen that have succumbed to addiction and had a dastardly, you know, ending or just a sad ending. And it, you know, there were celebrities I knew, and you know, I've been in the film business. I knew all kinds of people, the music people in the music business who died early. And I always wanted to write this song, but it had to be authentic, and it couldn't be contrived or preachy. There had to be sort of a poetic thing to it. And I was reading the newspaper one day, and I saw that Philip Seymour Hoffman had passed away. And being an actor, he was always one guy that I said, God, I wish I could have done a scene with him. You know, more tea, Mr. Hoffman. You know,
Yeah.
that be your
Yeah.
line. You know, and then
Oh.
get the hell off. You know, because you don't want to interfere with his great abilities.
Uh,
But I saw that, you know, he had died from an overdose, and he was right at the point where he had just turned his life around. And
yeah.
so that's why the opening line is such that it talks about him celebrating success, and the only way he knew how to do it was through his addictions. So he was suddenly having all his success. He said, well, I want to celebrate. And he went back to the old bad habits, and it came back and bit him. So if you read the lyrics in that song, they're very, very powerful. But that song I really dedicated to him because he had left behind a new little son. You know, he had a woman that he was in love with. It looked like they were going to get married. It seemed like his life was getting better. And I was happy for him. But then I started looking at what was going on, and that was the catalyst. So I wrote like 4 lines. I went, okay, I'm not stopping. And I literally went down, and in 4 pages in one of my writing books, I wrote the whole song.
Yeah, his portrayal of Truman Capote. Uh,
Oh, I'm just so many things. I mean, at all the things, all the movies he was in. What was the one with uh,
quite a time.
Burt Reynolds, the porn movie where it was about the porn stars?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. What was that? I can't think. I can't think which one, but I know which one you're talking
Yeah,
about. Yeah,
Boogie
yeah.
Nights, Boogie
Right,
Nights.
right.
But there are tons of great movies that he was in, and he was a great inspiration. You look at that, and you look at Keith Ledyard.
Yeah, I was
You
thinking
look at
that.
so many people that just they
Uh,
were playing with fire, and
River
it
Phoenix, River Phoenix. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I was just like, the Belushi brothers. They were from Chicago.
right. Yeah,
John. That was horrible what happened with
yeah,
him, and it really probably wasn't their intention for that to be the outcome. But the
no,
fact it was there and the pressures of that kind of life, uh, people sometimes can't handle the frequency and the vibration that comes
right.
with it because it gets real heavy. Your life can get real heavy, and sometimes you got to be able to figure a way to get out and you know because there's a center line, and as soon as you can't see that line anymore, then you're off the line,
Yeah,
either left or right. So when you start veering off into the ditch one way or the other, something's got to come along and kind of nudge you back over and get you back down that center line. And we all do it. We all waver from one side to another. It's a natural progression. But if you can it's like steering a sailboat. I love sailing. I mean, I wish I had the money to own a sailboat. I'm too old now. I mean, I could sit in one, but and I actually, when I met my wife, one of our first dates was I took her out on the sailboat that a friend of mine had, which was a beautiful sailboat, and she was impressed. So enough that she went out with me another time. So, and
that's a good way to start. That's a good way to start dating.
yeah,
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 that's
but
very neat. Well,
so
well. Speaking of acting, did you want to? What would maybe some either TV or feature films that you were in that the audience might remember you from? Do you want
well, I was in Home Improvement
to?
with
Okay.
Tim Allen.
Yeah, yeah. I used to
I
watch
was
that.
in Mel Gibson. I was in Payback with him.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I did the Untouchables TV series. I did Early Edition, Keanu Reeves in The Lake House. Um, a lot of unsolved mysteries. I still get checks,
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
what's the other one? Good Burger was kind of a funny. I met this casting director, and at this party in Hollywood, and I
Mhm.
was out there doing some production work, and I went to this party and met this gal, and she said, "Well, I should call you in. You've got something in. There's something about you." So she sent me over to this casting with these 2 nice African American gals who were the casting directors, and they said, "Well, they said, do you know how to dance?" And I said, "Do I know how to dance?" I said, "I'm from Chicago. I know how to dance." And they said, "Well, okay, show us your moves." And they had a little boom box, and they hit the boom box. And this is another reason my wife continued to date me, because I was the best dancer she'd ever
Ah,
gone out with.
there you
And so hit the boom box. Maybe not. She might dispute that now. But
go.
hit the boom box, and I started dancing, just doing the moves, babe. I got my mojo working. They started laughing. They literally fell out of their chairs because it was so funny, but it was really good. Did not expect it to come out of my bones. So I had little weird things like that happen. Um, one time I was on a flight flying out to California, and this guy, the one of the captains comes back. We're in flight. I fly first class because I'm a big guy and I just don't like being crammed into a seat. Uh, so this guy in a uniform comes back and he says, "Hey, can I ask you? Can I talk to you for a second?" I was like, "Sure. You need me to fly the plane?" He goes, "No, no, no." He says, "I want to talk to you." He says, "Are you an actor?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I am." "How'd you know?" He says, "Ah, dude, it just oozes." And I said, what do you got? What are you thinking?" He said, "Well, I have a friend of mine who is looking for an actor for um, uh, uh, Magnum PI, and it's going to shoot in Hawaii, and they're looking for kind of like this big guy to do this scene with Tom Selleck, and they can't find him." He says, "You're it." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yep. If it's okay, and you're paid up and screen as SAG-AFTRA." I said, "Yep, yeah. I'm active." So he comes back later, shipped to shore. He does some stuff with the casting director, gives me an address. I get off the plane. I go over to CBS in like where is it? Sherman Oaks, that kind of area, and go into this casting session. And they interview me, and they said, "You're booked. Can you go to Hawaii?" I said, "Do I need a passport?" And they said, "No." So they said, I said, "Really, I'm here finishing up a film production, special effects job I was working on." And I said, "I got a wife with, 2 kids at home. Uh, they said, 'Don't worry about it where you stand. We'll pick up the tab. Just stay loose with it.' And here's what the deal is." And they described this scene where Tom Selleck is walking through this bar and he bumps into this guy, and the guy spills his drink. And in a very good natured way, he says, "Sir, how about saying, apologizing? You just made me spill my drink on myself." And Selleck throws some flippant thing out like, "Grow up here," or something. Didn't say that, but something along those lines. And so one thing leads to another, and they kind of square off against each other. And this actor actually in the scene punches Tom Selleck, knocks him out, and it's the only time in the TV series where he gets knocked out, right? So I'm sitting there cooling my jets at this at La Park in West Hollywood, waiting to get the call, like, "Okay, you're going to be on flight 123 to Maui or Honolulu or wherever." And the call comes in, and they said, "Well, yeah, we're going to have to release you." And I was like, "Why is that? I mean, I'm perfect for the role, right?" I start trying to sell them on my. Now they decided that they really want to have a Hawaiian actor be the one that is the only person to knock him out. And I was like, "Well, did I ever tell you that I have like Hawaiian in my DNA?"
Hawaiian blood.
So in either case,
Oh, that's
yeah,
funny.
I mean,
That's
there's just a lot of funny, weird stuff would happen where people would come over and tap me on the shoulder and say, "Didn't I see you on TV last night?" And I go like, "I don't know. What were you watching?"
yeah.
It just kind of happened. It just happened for me. So, and it was a lot of fun. I got to work with a lot of people. It was funny when I did Payback. I knew Mel from a cigar club in Beverly Hills that I was a member of. And so, he and I kind of got to know each other, and we really enjoyed each other. We played backgammon against each other. So I went back to Chicago and I got booked on this movie. It's a Mel Gibson movie, and it was a very good role. And this is actually kind of funny. So I'm sitting there and we're getting ready, and Mel was nowhere around. Everybody's like, "Where's Mel? Where's Mel? I want to meet Mel. I want to be with Mel. I hope, I'm going to." I'm just looking at these people going like, you got to relax here. You got to chill out because this is not how you behave. Because a lot of these were Green Pea actors, right? And so the next thing we do this one scene, and I can see Mel coming around, and I'm going, he's a prankster, and I'm like a real big prankster too. So as he's walking around and being introduced to everybody, I'm doing the eclipse. I'm like behind him so he doesn't see me. And finally, I come up in this open space and I appear in front of him. And he goes, "Chester, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Acting." He says, "Oh, good." So we did this scene, and I was staying in one of the honey wagons, which is where they put it's like a little teeny little room, but it's on wheels. So you can go in there and change your clothes. There's a little bathroom. You can't close the door if you're going to use it, but everything is like for like miniature people. And next thing I know is there's a break in the action. They're setting the scene up. And this guy taps me on the shoulder and said, "Mr. Nichols." I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm sorry, my name's Kevin, and you're in the wrong wagon. So as soon as you come with me, let's go to where your clothes are, and I'm gonna get you into the right space." And I'm like, um, no, that's fine. It's all the other guys are staying there. No, 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 no. Mel insists that, and I'm going, "Oh God, what's he gonna do?
Right. I'm thinking.
You're not gonna believe this." So we go to the honey wagon. He won't let me touch anything. The AD says, "No, no, no, you're not carrying anything. I will carry everything. All your bags, your clothes, everything." And he somehow piled all this crap on because I was dressed for the scene, right? And he takes me around and we walk down, I want to say Madison Avenue, and we come up around the corner on State Street. And there's the line of all these big mobile homes, right? Those are where the stars are. He walks over to the first one. He opens up the door. He says, "Mr. Nichols, would you go into your mobile home?" And I was like, what are you talking about? You're pulling my leg." He says, "Oh, no, no, no. Mel insists." And it was like this beautiful, beautiful, it's like the biggest mobile home that was on the set of the movie. And so my clothes were there, and there was a whole spread of food and booze, and whatever you wanted was right there. I mean, so that was kind of funny. So when I finally did go in and do the scene with him, I said, "The mobile home thing, I really appreciate it, but you're really setting a bar really high for me. I don't know if I can compete with that."
Right.
So weird, just funny stuff would happen, so I had fun with it. Um, the acting business kind of went a little sideways because of after 9/11, and then the economy was weird. Everything after that, after 9/11, everything just kind of like somehow the vibrational things of where I thought we were heading, which was towards everybody working together and people were getting along and there's all kinds of stuff. And it suddenly was like just tearing, the structure was tearing. And I went back to working in the agencies as a creative director, and then was still writing music. I was writing novels, and for my novels, I would always immerse myself in the environment that I was writing about. So I would like there's this the last novel, which is the Children of Pentecost. There's one section in there where the main character, his life falls apart, and he just goes into this deep depression, walks away from his job as a doctor, and goes into drugs, alcohol, and he's running from his demons. So he decides he's going to be a cab driver because he can travel the world and he's always got wheels and a place to sleep, right?
Uh-huh.
So I went to a friend of mine who owned a cab company. I said, "Hey, I got to know what this whole cab driver's life is all about." So and he says, yeah, I'll hook you up. So I would immerse myself in this whole thing of driving a cab in
Yeah.
order to get the experience so I could write this section of this book.
Yeah.
So it's just like The Last Riders on Route 66, which is the first novel,
Right.
is this sort of uh, semi-biographical story, but there's a lot of people that I met as I was touring that I
Uh-huh.
populated the story with to
Yeah.
bring a lot of color and a lot of different types of characters and the rest of it. So
Right. Right. When I read that Last Riders, it reminded me of like a Jack Kerouac kind of a,
Tom Wolfe, Ken Kesey,
yeah,
Jack Kerouac,
yeah,
um, uh,
kind of thing.
definitely right up there.
That alley. Well, let me see here. I think we covered quite a bit.
Okay.
Let me ask you this though. As far as like in music, do you prefer behind the scenes, kind of the writing and the recording, or do you prefer being in front of people, the performing live?
I mean, I like both.
Wow.
I do
Okay.
like both. I mean, there's something sort of artist in the garret that you have when I'm a one-stop composer. So I write all the parts, I play all the instruments, I do the singing, I do the mixing, the mastering, I write the songs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I really love the crafting part of it and the spont spot spontaneity that happens. There's a lot of spontaneous things that happen in there where, especially when I'm working on like some of this newer stuff that I've got, like my newest album, not quite finished yet, is Flying My Pyramid, which was inspired by this whole album is inspired by dreams. And it's all instrumental. It's very neoclassical, but electronic and real spacey, kind of new agey, a little bit of blend of all of those. So it's me kind of sitting down and finding sounds and finding tonalities and creating melodies that are going to be hit certain frequencies with people who listen to them. So the initial responses I've been getting to that particular song. There's another one called Caravan to Orion, which is
Mhm.
people are just saying, I've got people over in Europe that are like crazy for this song. So, I mean, I enjoy doing that. On the same token, writing a song is actually a little harder than doing an instrumental composition because you've got to write the lyrics, you got to sing the part.
Mhm.
And I had a very frightening experience about 4 years ago where it was like pre-COVID, and I had a virus that attacked my throat and paralyzed both my vocal cords,
Mhm.
paralyzed them. And they didn't know how it would happen or how to fix it. So I went through vocal training. I went through vocal, which I've been through because I was a trained singer. I studied voice through grade school, high school, college. I knew all the warm-ups. My dad was an opera singer. I came from that kind of family. So I knew how to take care of the voice because it still sounds good, reasonably good. But it froze. And this guy worked with Adele, Robert Plant, Sir Paul, Elton John, all these other people. And he said, I've never seen anything like this. And the largest bundle of nerves that you have in your body and your brain are that connect to your voice box. And so I said, well, I'm wondering, why can I still talk, but I can't sing? Because I couldn't carry a tune. I was working on the song I Was Dreaming, which is a beautiful song. And I was just sweetening some voice parts to it. And I was just coming off of like bronchitis.
Yeah.
And then when
Yeah.
I went into the studio to try to sweeten these tracks, fortunately they were already done. I couldn't sing, couldn't hold a note, couldn't sing. So I went through all this physical therapy, voice therapy, And they said, you know, you're just going to have to kind of work your way through it, and it's going to work its way out. So I pray the rosary, okay? And I would when I would drive to work, I'd pray the rosary, and pray for the world. I pray for my family. I pray for my friends. Da, da, da. It's better than listening to talk radio, you know, let's put it that way, or some music that you don't like. And then while I was doing that, and I'm trying to sit there and going, God, you know, fix my voice, a little voice in my head said, sing the rosary.
Okay.
So that's what I did. I started singing the rosary, lower up to the higher and then down. And within about 4 months, my voice was back.
Mm.
So, you know, again, singing, writing a song, you got to write the lyrics. They got to be real. They got to be authentic, unless they're conceptual and they're kind of funny. Like I like country music because sometimes I can go into the comedic side of Chet, you know, like, thank you for breaking my heart, you know,
Yeah.
basting my Thanksgiving turkey with tears, you know, those kinds of things. And I'll actually sit down and write those things. So,
Yeah.
because it's there. If I don't, it's always going to be in front of me going, what about me? What about me? What about me? You know, so,
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. And, you know, performing in front of people, you get that immediate reaction. You know, you're right there with those people, you know.
yeah,
With the music that you record, it's not so immediate, but it's
mhm,
there for posterity. You know,
it
it's there for
is.
further
And
generation.
I get a lot of songs that come to me um, in my dreams. So I just have am in the lucid dreaming, and things just come, and I'll just go, well, that was really incredible, that idea. And so I got my writing journal right by my bed. I'll wake up in the middle of the night. I use these what they call pilot pens, what
Uh-huh.
airplane pilots use, where the
Uh-huh.
tip is lights up. So you don't
Yeah.
have to turn the lights on to wake the wife up. You know, I just
Yeah.
click this thing and then I can sit and write, you know, whatever I need to write. If it's 4 lines, if it's just a title, or if it's 2 pages, I can just sit and write, and I turn it off and I go back to bed. So there's the song, the album, Hollywood Altars or Twilight Journals, where a lot of those are inspired by these dream experiences I've had.
Okay. All right. Well, I
Which
think if
actually
I
can, they can actually translate to what's going on in the world right now. Because sometimes I'm going like, wake me up, somebody, please.
exactly, exactly. I think if I wrote songs about my dreams, they would be about being lost, being I can't find my car. I
Mhm.
have so many dreams
Hold on a
about
minute. There's a
I
song
will.
there. There's a song there.
There's a song there.
I
I
can't find my car.
I can't find my car. I parked it someplace, and then I go and do something,
Oh,
and then I go back, and it's not there anymore.
and here's where you
I
go with it. You go,
yeah
I
yeah
can't find my car,
yeah
and you were in it.
yeah. Yep. Or journeys. You know, I know how to get home going these streets and this way,
Mhm.
but then I'd go that way and I'm still lost. You know, well, I have a lot like that. I have a whole
And
quite a
suddenly
bit of
it turns into the road
yeah.
disappears and it turns into jungle. You know.
Yeah, that and the other one big theme is having a major exam coming up and I haven't studied for it.
Oh, okay.
Oh boy. Or an essay that's due and I haven't even started writing it. I have a lot of anxious moments in my dreams, but I have good
Well,
dreams too. But yeah.
yeah, the song "Flying My Pyramid," which
Uh,
is one of the new instrumentals, was inspired by a dream. I was dreaming I was walking
uh,
through the jungle, and lucid dream, right? Walking through the jungle, walking through the jungle, and you know, I wasn't frightened or anything, but it's very heavy overgrowth. Finally, I broke through, and in front of me was this rolling sand dunes, right? Just and a full moon, stars were just unbelievable. And sitting in the middle of the landscape was this pyramid being lit by the moon. And in the dream, I walk up to it and I'm kind of rubbing my hands on it because it had like hieroglyphics on it. Next thing I know is it opens up and I go inside and I'm walking around and feeling the hieroglyphics in the walls. And suddenly it opens up into a room and it's a control room for a spaceship, right? And so I sit down in this chair, and the next thing, all of the walls and everything disappear. And I'm just sort of in this zero axis seat, right? Where there's nothing below me, nothing around me, blocking my view. And I grab the arms of this chair, and suddenly the pyramid lifts off. And suddenly I can feel it starting to fly. And I lift, this whole thing lifts off, and I start going up and around the world and circling the globe. And then I went out to the moon, and then looking at it going like this, back to the earth. And then I was like, oh, maybe I'll go out to the stars. And I was like, maybe I won't. So the next thing I know is I wake up, I'm back on this on the sand, right? Face down on the sand. I get up and shake it off. I look around me and I go, where the hell did I park that pyramid? Because it's
Where
gone.
did you, where did you park it?
So I
Oh,
but I had this whole vision of what I wanted the music to be like. And I have these guys up in San Francisco they create these really interesting instruments. They're called Sound Iron is the name of the company. And this one guy created this new instrument, and I heard it, and it was just like, it went right through me. I was like, oh, hello, brother, and I've used this instrument on a few songs already because it's something else. Pat Metheny has sort of that muted but twangy kind of thing that he does. It's smooth and with some delay and like chorus on it. This thing is sort of, but this is different. This is like an Indian instrument that has all those kind of components to it.
what's it called? Did you say?
Flying My Pyramid.
Okay. I mean the instrument. The instrument.
Oh, it's an aquis
Okay.
is the name of the instrument.
Okay.
It's a lot of fun.
All right. Chet, anything in closing that you'd like to plug or talk about or mention?
No, I just, hope that I appreciate you, reaching out to me. It's always fun to share stories. As you can
Yes.
see, I could probably sit down and we could have, like 2 weeks worth of fishing and go through lots of stories. And I left many, many stories out. Just tried to stay on topic to what we're doing, but I just hope that people enjoy their music and that they explore different types of music. I work with a lot of young people, and I'm shocked sometimes. I'll go like, so who's your favorite guitarist? Like Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, and they'll look at me like, who's that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm serious, it happens. I'm going like,
Yeah. Right.
well, and so there's, it's funny because you kind of feel like if you don't know about this stuff, what is it? You have people walking around living on another planet in another world, and they're 3 doors down.
Right. Right.
So just embrace everything. Try to, we were talking about history to start off. Read history, study history. I'm really into ancient history, ancient civilizations, studying what they're all about, because they get you scratching your head. You go like, and the thing is that they're not making it up. They have these 2,000-pound etched stones that are stuck in a field someplace, and they go like, well, we don't know how they got here, and we have no idea how they cut that stone.
Right.
So you go like, what is going on here?
Easter Island and all of those. Yeah, some fascinating stuff. I thoroughly enjoy history. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, we could go on. We could definitely go on.
I can
Make
do a
this
part. part two
Yeah.
sometime if you want to do it.
Okay. Okay. We can think of some other subjects and other matters to
Yeah.
talk about.
I'll
Yeah.
just respond to whatever you're looking for. So
Okay.
you could probably say, hey, I want to talk about this or this cued this or this cued this, and start off with a different list. And
Right. Well, direct people to your website, for more stories too, and more.
okay.
There's a wealth of information. Yeah.
ChetNichols.net, ChetNichols.net, not
Yeah.
.com. ChetNichols.com will take you to a Chinese porno site.
Well, maybe they want to go there instead.
No, please don't go. So I
Okay.
had
Well,
I had ChetNichols.com, but the credit
okay.
card I used to hold the URL
Uh-huh.
uh, was it ran out of hadn't been renewed.
Okay.
And so
Yeah.
when they went to renew it, they just said, well, we're going to make this available. And another songwriter named Chet Nichols grabbed it.
Yeah. Yeah. That
And he got
happens.
rid of it. He got rid of it and went to Facebook, and then it became
Yeah.
available. And then they wanted like $10,000 for it. And I said, I'm not going to pay $10,000.
No, you don't want to do that. No.
All right, pal. Well, it's been great to meet you, and
Yeah.
thank you for. It's been a real delight and an honor to be, on your show and to help to share this information with you.
Well, I appreciate it, and I think people will get a lot out of this, watching this, and thanks for all your anecdotes and your interesting stories along the way. That's what keeps it interesting.
Yeah,
Keeps people wrapped and attentive.
exactly.
So yeah. All
Okay.
right. Well, I will send you once I get this edited a little bit. I'll send you a copy, and you can post
Okay.
it on your site or wherever you
Okay.
want to.
All right.
And then we'll see what kind of traction and what kind of responses we get.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds
All
good.
right. All right,
All
Chet.
right.
Well, you
All
have a
right.
good
I
rest of
bless
the
you.
weekend.
I bless you with love and light and with pure source energy.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And the same to you,
All right, my friend.
because I could not repeat that. No, the same, but the same back to you, Chet.
All
And
right, man. Take care.
all the
All right.
best to you. Okay.